Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Nishant, and welcome to another episode of the Nishant Garg Show. The mission of this show is to spread awareness on mindfulness practices, psychology, mental health, and spirituality. My job on this show is to invite world-class performers to share their practices to live a fulfilled life. Today's guest is Dr. Andrea Goeglein. Dr. Andrea altered the truth of her age and got a job at a Wall Street brokerage firm at 14. By 24, she opened her first operating ice cream business in Reno, Nevada. After many businesses and a PhD in organizational psychology, later she felt she had experienced enough stress and anxiety to be an expert. Today, she is a success catalyst and known as Dr. Success. Andrea is the founder, curator, and author of the Don't Die self-development collection of books, and her latest book is Don't Die, Waiting to Be Brave. In this episode, Dr. Andrea discusses that do not deny reality, learn to defy reality. Life success in all areas is only limited by what you believe. Why love is the only real measure of success. How to develop success backed by science, driven by your values, and powered by what you love. To know more, keep listening. Dr. Andrea Goeglein, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I'm thrilled to have you. Some people call you Dr. Andrea. Some people call you Dr. Success.
Yes.
Why? Why people call you Dr. Success?
Well, I'm gonna tell you, I wish I had this incredible story about, I've made billions of dollars and I deserve to be Dr. Success. No, I have a PhD. That's where the doctor part of it comes from. And my belief in the science of positive psychology and the sciences that came before positive psychology about how you achieve the highest levels of well-being and life satisfaction. And I just happen to apply it to the word we use the most around, and that's success. I just put that all together. And then this is the funny part. I just decided one day to check out if it had been copyrighted, assuming, of course, someone had trademarked Dr. Success. And I really do believe that I trademarked it 90% because I was shocked nobody else had. And, that's how, and, I hope today those that get to listen to us understand that so much of what you and I will share and where I know I come from. Yes, I am deep into goal setting and planning and how to use positive emotions and how to raise those positive emotions in order to move your life forward and have goals. The reality is it's really about awareness and having such a deep understanding of what you value and what your natural strengths are, that as opportunities come your way and opportunities that also don't look so great, you can bring the best of who you are to them and evolve them into the next potential of where you go.
I will come back to the positive emotions part in a while. And Before that, I would like to ask you, you got a job at a Wall Street brokerage firm at the age of 14. Mm-hmm. How did it happen?
Oh, it happens. This tails on to what I just said. Be ready for the opportunities. So I had the privilege of being born into a family of the youngest girl and only girl to 3 older brothers. And my brother Wayne, who was 5 years older, had a friend. And one day his friend called. He worked at a Wall Street firm and wanted to hire my brother Wayne to come in and do some envelope stuffing. This is 1971. And they used to manually fold your reports into envelopes. And my brother Wayne was not home. And I said to his friend, you know what? I can come and do it. It's Easter break. And he said, okay, just don't tell anyone how old you are. And I did. And I performed. I wore a dress when everybody else wore jeans. And at the end of it, they asked if I wanted a summer job. And that's when I had to fess up to how old I really was.
How much money did you make at that time?
My summer wage was $110 per week. So for 40 hours I was making, and this was the summer of 1971.
That's a lot of money.
Yes. Well, I will also tell you that the Easter break was quote unquote off the books. That they just paid us in checks as we left on that given day. But I will tell you, and it is a good thing to understand where we are and how things evolve so wonderfully, even when they don't seem to. There I was. My dad was horrified that I wanted to get a job. Like, what are you talking about? If you're going to work, you're going to just come and work in my butcher shop. You're not going to go and work somewhere else. And I said, no, there are things I would like to acquire. Money has always motivated me, and I'm not ashamed of that. And I saved up as best I could to buy a very expensive leather coat. So yes, $110 was an enormous amount of money. And it probably laid the foundation of how I respected what work could do and employment could do to help elevate where I was in life.
What was your learning experience at that age? Because that is very tender age.
Yes.
We don't know much about the world. We basically don't know anything.
Yeah. Well, when you come in a family where there are, everybody else is older. My youngest brother in the set was 5 years older than me. My oldest brother was 10. So I was an observer from birth. And they were very active boys, let's say. I don't know what type of euphemism that really is for the kind of behaviors, but they were more than a handful. And so what work did for me was give me structure in a less than structured environment. Because, boys have a lot of testosterone and they act out a lot of ways, and they kept my parents very busy. And so it helped me, and they were very diverse in their personalities, very diverse. And it just helped me having a place to go to. I also was quite the chubby little girl. And it kept me from having to deal with whether or not to wear a bathing suit that summer. I mean, sometimes life is just that simple. Opportunities arise and help you avoid some things you don't want to do. And I would ask your listeners to think of where they are, even at this moment in life. Forget being a 14-year-old. At this moment in life, the things that you're trying to avoid, where might there be an opportunity for you to grow through it?
Everybody is trying to avoid some or the other thing in their life, including me. And avoidance can be a bliss. How do you become aware of your avoidance in your personal life?
I will make this very, very personal. I noticed a long time ago that I had this line that said, if my little porcupine spikes popped up when you said something or did something, generally that was something that I better circle back to pay attention to. And then through all of my various education and experiences, I did learn that a reflective tendency, a good reflective tendency, was noticing, say you work with someone who irritates, annoys you down to your very, very last nerve. Pay attention, because generally whatever it is about that person that's annoying you so much may be a hint as to something you need to resolve in yourself and to evolve in yourself.
This is very profound, to be aware of what is annoying us in that conversation or with somebody else. Mm-hmm. Do you recommend any practice to be more self-reflective, to be more kind and tender towards us and towards others?
Well, the greatest and first step that everyone must take is to first start being kind to yourself. And that is not a cliche. It's not some stupid self-help statement.
It is everywhere.
Let's just call it what it is not. It is not any of those things. And here's why. What we know, and I'm not going to say that we know exactly how many thoughts per nanosecond actually float through our mind. I will just ask you and ask those who are joining us today to think about a time when they walked past a mirror, like at some point today, and whether or not they caught the very thought that they were having. Many times, we are doing what I call the nanosecond evaluation. Most of the time, it's not good. Oh, I've got to straighten my tie, or I've got to do this, or I've got to do that. The other place to really pay attention to how quickly thoughts enter your mind is as you begin to awake in the morning. I have a little segment that I call Get Back in Bed, because your thoughts and your train of thoughts, particularly in a negative way, can start the choo-choo train downhill from the time you open up your eyes. And all it takes, and this is the glory of this work, these things that I suggest cost you no money and very little time. And that's how you heighten your awareness. So initially, long before I ever ask you to be self-reflective and to take 5 minutes to start, quieting your mind, or long before that, I ask you just to start noticing the random thoughts that sneak into your brain when you do not even know that you're saying something to yourself. Because the line is, you cannot have a negative mood without first having a negative thought.
Does it ever happen to you that when you wake up in the morning, your mind is overwhelmed? You're thinking about so many things that you got to do this, you got to do that.
Yes. In fact, I have actually, and I am a very disciplined person. I don't just teach the work that I teach and learn the work that I learn, but I really discipline myself to apply it. So we've been in a very interesting time period, and my schedule looks dramatically different than it did 12 weeks ago. And one of the things I knew about my own schedule was that Mondays were one of my quote unquote worst days. Not worst days from I hate Mondays, scheduling. For some reason, and since I'm the only person who puts anything on my schedule, we know what the real reason is, but we'll speak about that in a moment. But for some reason, over the course of years, I had begun to schedule my Mondays from 6:30 in the morning till my last client at 7:30 at night. And during this 12-week period, I realized, when all of a sudden everything initially got erased and there was that adjustment, I set a goal, and the line that I use for myself is, everything doesn't have to get done on Monday. And for the time being, I'm actually under-scheduling my Mondays dramatically to discipline myself. When I am the most productive is not when I am overscheduled. So those thoughts about getting, when you start out in the morning, the reason your mind starts that way is because, in fact, you have a lot to do. And or there are things in your personal life that are really weighing heavily and you have not processed them. So I'll give you 2 ways to handle this. The normal scheduling stuff, quite honestly, it's a discipline that many time management people teach, and I think it's great. 1 day a week, and for me it's Sunday nights, establish your schedule and go through it so that you begin to understand where you maybe have to really step it up a bit, or where there's gaps, so that you are already in control mentally of your schedule. Then the other part of it is, at the end of the day, one of the things you really should do is a mental dump. all those things that are biting at your tail when you get up in the morning really were there the night before and probably caused you not to have a great night's sleep. So if you review your following day and begin to know how you will handle tight schedules, having to travel from one place to the other, if you take control of that before you get to bed, and no, you just don't look at the schedule and get panicked by it, but you actually think through how you're going to handle it, then go to sleep.
Are you saying that every night we can review our day that same day and we can visualize who we want to be, what we want to achieve the next following day?
Absolutely.
Is it some sort of a meditation?
Well, in positive psychology, one of the 12 researched techniques was seeding your dreams. And this was one that Marty Seligman, the founder, one of the founding father, or the lead founding father of the field, that at the end of, as you're in bed and you're going through the process of what I call the dump, to get rid of the anxiety of the day and or the anticipated anxiety of the next day, then seed your dreams. And you seed them by seeing, wow, I've got this covered. I know I can catch that train and make it to that meeting on time. Everything's just going to flow. You actually, instead of seeing your car breaking down or the train getting stalled and things that may have happened to you in your past, you envision it in a smooth way. So, do I believe that? Absolutely. One of the second things that I deal in, the first one is do not deny reality, defy it. And that's what that is known as doing. So you have a very complex schedule. Don't deny it. Now, set the tone to defy it. The second part of it is you are only limited by what you believe about a situation. So if you believe you're going to be run down and fatigued, if you believe it's a chaotic schedule, if you believe those things, you're going to be tired and feeling like the mix of chaos. If you are a person that says, no matter how complex my schedule is tomorrow, the right doors are going to open, the right trains are going to show up, it's going to work for me, you at least start out in a better position.
I can definitely take this practice because I have a crazy week coming up. And as a listener to this podcast, Andrea, I'm thinking, okay, great. I've got this practice. I can just sit down in the night. I can think about the day. I can think about what I'm going to do tomorrow. I can visualize all those obstacles. I can visualize my success, everything. But the challenge is the discipline, sitting every night. How to do that?
The answer to that is yes. It's a discipline, as in all life success. Discipline, as much as I will say be ready for the unknown and the uncertainty and be able to step into it using your natural strengths, like that is the truth. We really don't know what's going to happen next. However, what we do know is if we manage our minds instead of our minds managing us, and that's all discipline is. That's all mindfulness is you making a decision to establish a discipline. Now, when I say review the day and visualize the next day, I'm talking 90 seconds. 90 seconds is all it will take you to do this. And to remember to do it, if you're a person who likes using a smartphone, and you have a regular, all the science supports regular bedtime. So if at some point before, you could even do it. I'm not a fan of multitasking because it fractures thinking, but as you're brushing your teeth, you can begin that process. And then, so set a discipline. I can't, it's not fairy dust. The work of life success is the discipline of loving yourself so much that you want to see the optimum you can achieve and the impact it will have on yourself and others.
When we talk about success in different areas of life or going to another level constantly, how to find that balance between being appreciative of what we already have and moving forward? Sometimes it gets difficult for A type, including me, to stop, just keep moving forward.
I'm a person who actually likes to go a million miles an hour, like really a million miles an hour. However, I know that that doesn't give me the best result. So at the end of the day, what do I really want? For me, I am most excited, and in my work, the work that I like the most that I do is the 90-day programs that I do with executives and business owners, where there is a focus on the next level of achievement. One, because I like condensed, rapid impact. That has to be balanced with then the times where I'm not doing that. I don't do that all the time. So again, I'm going to go back to the word discipline. And discipline, again, is only you caring for yourself the most so that you can achieve the most.
Being disciplined, does it come naturally to you or you have to practice?
I will say from a behavioral perspective, there are definitely some people who, like, I function better with a schedule than without one. But that may mean that the first 3 hours of my day are scheduled for mindful reflection, writing, exercise.
What other mindful practices do you have in your day-to-day schedule?
Well, having been at this for a few decades, and it took me a few decades to get disciplined about it. And you know, that's what I want to share almost more than anything around when I use the word discipline. When you realize that something would actually help. And for me, honestly, I always needed science and a good study to show that something, especially if it was in the more esoteric fields, such as writing, was considered in the 80s and 90s, and definitely reflective or meditative practices. So make sure you don't have a deadline you have to achieve it by, because it truly took me, my goodness, if I was to admit, from the I was a child and was trying schedules of eating lists. You were supposed to time where you were eating and associate it with your mood. I failed miserably at it for decades. And then I tried to journal. Yeah, for about the first 2 days, right after I bought the journal and petted it and loved it, I did just great. And then there was a turning point. External life was just above average chaotic. It was really horrible from any perspective. And I was also getting my doctorate, and I took a class on spirituality and leadership. And one of the requirements was I had to journal through the 12-week period and then write a report and do an analysis and all this other stuff. And I was mad as heck. I mean, I could not believe that they thought I had 15 minutes a day to sit down and do such a ridiculous thing. But that was a turning point.
Spirituality and leadership. It's
yes.
a deadly combination. Tell us more on that, please.
Okay, so that was in 1995. There was nearly no research, but I had the privilege of stumbling upon a professor who that was her area. And she had whatever little research was available. And it was about the first real acknowledgments. Like, what I know where we stand today is that the seeds of it grew definitely in the work environments through the 80s through customer service training and then into the 90s, where all of a sudden spirituality, the spirit of the leader, became as important as the behavioral tendencies, or we began to know that regardless of the behavioral tendencies, you better understand how the person self-assesses. And reflection and writing are really just tools of self-reflection. So one of the many studies that came out of the mid-90s was one of the first ones with a bunch of MBA students, where they noticed that MBA students who journaled held themselves more ethically responsible for decisions that they made. And that meant the spirit of the individual was informing their ability to lead.
Considering what is going on in the United States and in the world about coronavirus and racism, can we get a better perspective through self-reflection practices if we incorporate that every day?
Oh my goodness. I think anyone who cares about their community and their ability to live and thrive and create within their communities has a personal obligation. Forget everybody else. Don't even go to thinking about the more global systemic issues. First, see how you speak to yourself, what you've accepted in your background, what, those little times where you said, I think that's so good. Just think about all the times I know myself that I hold ridiculous prejudices. And then I call myself out on them. And then I start checking, is it real? And, people who came through the corporate ranks in the 70s, 80s, 90s, we had very, very stringent ways that you had to look and had to behave. And now those have been broadened over the last 2.5 decades. And we're just at a point of understanding how that broadening can now integrate all people who want to participate and achieve. We're at a great doorway. It's crappy. I do not like where I am right now at all. And my belief, having studied over decades the evolution of how corporations, and one of the things, if your listeners remember, somewhere in the last 12 months, the CEOs, I think it was something like 400 CEOs signed a letter and made it public on how they were now going to be not only accountable for their stock price, but the impact of how they operated. And I got to tell you, that was decades. I've been in that conversation decades. When that came out, it was like that doorway had just begun to swing open. Where we are now, it's like the Grand Canyon had a split. However, I believe more so than ever, as I have watched, we are headed in a direction that will help more people be more creative and shift the economy that more people will be involved in as we go forward.
How can we double our positive focus? It's a game of being focused on the things that matter, right?
Yes. Yeah. In my work, I have the 3 F's: focus, follow up, and follow through. So if you think about what I've spoken about on discipline, here's the deal about discipline and observation. Please don't ever take on more than one thing at a time in order to adjust. If you've seen something that you're an overscheduler, or that you exercise so much and then your muscles are sore, or that you work and you blow through all your relationships, whatever it is, that you would like to see a better outcome, don't take on all of them at one time. Take on one and add one discipline. What is one discipline that would help improve this situation. And that's the worst part for we who tend towards excess and type A behavior. We want to blow up the wall instead of, knock it down. The image of the Berlin Wall being up forever and ever, and then all of a sudden one day it coming down. Well, no, it was being chipped out for a very long time. So what I would say is take whatever blocks you believe you have, whatever walls you believe you have, identify one of the blocks and work on discipline for that one block. You'll be able to accelerate that a little in some situations. But in order for you to really assimilate a shift and make it yours, don't believe any of these 27 days, behavioral changes in 27 days and all of this other, that's nonsense. It's a good start. I use 30 days as my test period. Like right now, I set a new discipline. I took a learning course in these last few weeks. I set a new discipline. I set every new discipline for 30 days, and I only set one new discipline per 30 days. But think about it. That gives me 12 new disciplines a year, according to the area. So it's a lot, but one at a time. And then you will. So if you're a person who wants to adjust your schedule and not be as chaotic, maybe you don't do both the Sunday night overview of your whole schedule and the every night. Do one of them for the next month. See how it works. Then add the next one, because the first one will have become second nature.
You are not alone in this journey. We all struggle in life. There is no shame in talking about it. I go through my highs and lows. I get depressed. But these practices really help me in living a resilient and mindful life. You can also do this. You got this. Don't judge yourself. And this practice is more of working in one area of life or learning a new skill set. Mm-hmm. You are saying that learning one skill set at a time, not trying to accommodate many things or many new things at a time. I want to ask you, how do we achieve balance in every area of life, like physical, emotional, spiritual, mental areas? It's difficult, right?
Yep. Goes back to the same. It goes back to awareness, where you started with me. The Harvard Business Review has an article, boy, I bet it's at least 15 years old. I use it with every one of my clients when I onboard. And it's the kaleidoscope of life. And you have to just pause long enough and say, where am I in each of these boxes? And I'm going to tell you one thing. The word balance does not relate to me. I am a person who wants to achieve optimum performance, greatest well-being. It means that sometimes all I do is pay attention. If you've ever opened a business, or if you've ever been in a startup, or if you've ever had a baby, there are things that all of a sudden all rules don't count. You've got one thing you've got to pay attention to, and only that one thing. You're not going to achieve balance at that moment. But here's the thing about focus and follow up and follow through. If you have established a practice, the self-care practices of mindfulness, and you have a daily practice where you take 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 15 minutes, and it's the same time every day, and you review your life and show that you can manage your mind and your mind doesn't have to manage you, and you process through those things that have worked well, and that seeds your day, with that becomes your stabilizer. So when you begin to get out of balance through the course of deep involvement, you can pull yourself back. And particularly if you know what your natural strengths are, you begin to use those to push you forward and to also be the place you go to when you want to take a rest.
When you work on writing and journaling, or so to speak, reviewing your day and life,
Mhm.
do you work on some prompts or is it free flow?
For me, there is only one that is set. And then I'm also going to offer a caution for those who are more conscientious thinkers, those that are more, who may lean towards more pessimism, but I'll speak about that in a moment. The one thing that is in every day is the I am grateful for. And I do 5 I am grateful for statements following the science of gratitude, which is that you must recognize something and affirm it. Recognize and affirm. So I may have on my list that I am grateful for Sally for having delivered the podcast we recorded so that I can get a blog written tomorrow. But I am very specific as so that I remember that something good happened and what that looked like. I really am empathetic towards people whose eyes roll when someone says, you've got to be more grateful. And I will tell you rather graphically that one of the techniques that I use with people is to be grateful for their bowel movements. And it is something that we take for granted. But if you've ever known someone who has been ill, what they wouldn't give for normal system. And so if you train yourself on things that are in your life that you take for granted, such as how your body works on a daily basis, and then move it into the realm of statements that say, I am grateful, and you just make sure that you affirm and recognize, you will begin to see that there are very good things going on in your life, even when you don't pay attention to them.
I love how you connected to my previous question of how can we be more appreciative of what we already have?
Yes. Yes. I always ask that you start with the things that you have never thought about being appreciative for. And I will tell you that I had a service provider. I walked in for a meeting, 2 months ago. And this woman looked at me and said, do you know, ever since you told me to keep track of being grateful for my bodily functions, I think about you and just smiled that you suggested it. In that nanosecond, that woman is elevating her own positive mood. And that alone helps move you towards the possibility of seeing that there are better outcomes available.
These practices sound simple.
Yes.
Yes, they are simple, and it requires practice, discipline to do every single day. What do you think people struggle the most in their lives, even though we have all these simple practices? Positive psychology, being grateful, visualization, meditation is still a lot of people struggle.
Well, I'll go back to your other question also, because I'm not sure I was totally complete about behavior. You know, part of it is behavioral type. There are certain behavioral types that like structure. There are certain natural strengths. If you're a person with perseverance as one of your core strengths, it's easier for you versus, say, someone who may have the natural strength of beauty, where they love to sit in wonder. So they may get more distracted, but I will tell you that, again, there is wonderful effects of allowing your mind to just wander, as long as you capture the feeling of the wandering. And so if a child runs by and the way the child ran and waddled, put a smile on your face. Pause long enough to remember that.
Pause is the key word here.
Pause is a huge.
And I would like to ask you, whenever you face any challenge or struggle in your life, how do you handle that? Do you just do it on your own all the time, or you have a coach, mentor, or therapist?
I have an army of
Please explain about that.
I have an army of mental, physical, and spiritual support. So for my body, I take classes and I work with trainers. For my business, just because I am an expert in what I do, and especially the application of helping business people succeed and craft the goals they want and strategies they want, does not mean that I do not continually seek out that information and that support for myself. I also had the privilege of being brought up in a mainstream religion that evolved into a spiritual, deep knowledge of spiritual practices across many traditions. And I have spiritual advisors, people who I go to because affirming and prayer was just a part of my mainstream religious upbringing. So for me to go to someone and pray together, that's a very natural thing for me. For others, it would be going into a room and meditating. For others, so what I am saying is have your counsel of support. And that's what's the most challenging for people of high success, is that they think they don't need the support and others assume they don't need it. That once they're at the top or they own the company, they actually need it more than when they were just navigating their own lives. Honest to goodness.
When you work with successful executives, they're already successful. They have achieved so much. What challenge do you see working with them?
I think it goes back to your last question, asking for help, knowing that they shouldn't be seen as doing it alone. I actually have clients who will not acknowledge that they work with me. And we sign a contract at the beginning where they can say anything they want about our work together. I can only say something after they've given me permission. People don't know who I work with or don't work with. However, those that seem, and this is only observational on my part, those that are willing to create the disciplines, learn the science, apply the science, and then teach it to those around them and talk about it and the work that they've done, they actually set up a culture or a system where people know, not only do I not have to be right and already know, it's really good to ask for support.
Somebody who is listening to this podcast may not have a good circle of friends. They may not have a great army of counsels.
Yes.
So how can they go out and find that support? Because sometimes, or most of the time, that support comes with a price in terms of money.
Correct. And I will tell you that the last 10 years very solidly, and I actually have a little social media post that goes up every so often. If you're not willing to do the free stuff, my fee is not the problem.
Free stuff? What is that?
Okay, so here's one of the free things I'm talking about, and this is a very specific example. You've heard me talk about using your core strengths in order to support you during the good times and the bad times and helping you. So on my website, you can actually go and you will get the information on how to go to the lab that has a statistically valid free survey, your values in action, and it's from the VIA Institute, and you can start there. So my point is, we live in a time where there is no information that you cannot find. What you really begin to need, though, and I will say without exception, if you don't have a trusted person in your life, it's because you have not put the effort towards finding a trusted. And I don't care I don't care if it's the 90-year-old who lives next door or the coworker. There has to be someone, and you begin to build your circle of people you can bring information and talk to. I was reading this article. It said this. I'm having a hard time doing it. I read this. You want to have someone who you could bounce it off. So long before you ever think about investing, there is a whole lot of self-study matched with finding people you trust in your circle to bounce the information off of and help develop your thinking around it. And then, there are everything from community college classes that offer the same exact type of work I do to, Harvard executive programs that do the same thing. I mean, the information, that's the glory of where we are in the world. There is no information that you cannot get access to. You just have to be very prudent, because most information is not great information. It is one of the reasons why I stick to the top universities and their labs for my initial sources of where I get the research from. It's why when I want research on belief systems and how to impact them and intentions and visualization, I go to the research at Noetic Sciences, because that institution was established by an astronaut who was very methodical, and then in his experiences in space realized the great awe that maybe we didn't really know where all of this came from. And so I trust their research. You have to do a little bit of homework in establishing the sources that you get your information, but it's really all available.
I would like to ask you something about the belief system in terms of success.
Mm-hmm.
There could be a possibility that somebody is doing all the gratitude thing, they're visualizing meditation, still things are not moving. The big things are not happening. Is it because of something is not going deeper into the subconscious, or we have certain filter that is all the good information is not going deep into our subconscious mind?
I would never say yes to that. I would say that is one of the possibilities. Examining where you have blocks. I just read a great piece today from a clinical psychologist on shame, and Brene Brown is one who speaks about shame. Like, we go about our daily lives and we don't really pay attention to where something may have been rooted in our family systems or school systems in a way that we are ashamed. One I love is, someone who will say very derogatory, he didn't work for that money. Who made it bad that you were just given the gift of money? Like, who made that bad? But somewhere along the line, maybe in your life, someone made that bad. So you think unless you screw up your whole life and blow through every relationship and work 48 hours a day, you don't deserve that money. And you will not know that unless you examine the deeper underlying statements that people may have said in your life. So is it possible that you start out with gratitude and then you realize it's not moving, there's something else? Keep looking. Keep looking. Think of statements that you heard people say and that became the basis of how you judged yourself.
We have talked about block a couple of times in this conversation. I would like to ask you, what's the biggest block people face in general?
You mean other than their own thoughts?
Can be any.
You mean other than that? And I will say that your own thoughts cover everything from the unknown things, like you didn't realize that when your mom said money doesn't, you asked for something and your mother said money doesn't grow on trees, that was actually implanting the potential thought that money really isn't available. It is very scarce, and I may not ever have enough because money doesn't grow on trees. That's how simple that gets planted.
When did you realize in your life that, my thought is my biggest block? When did you get aware of this thought process?
I was taught it. I thought you were crazy. because I thought I had all the best thoughts. I mean, no, I'm serious. I came into a system that said, if you do the right things and say the right things and wear the right clothes and go to the right schools and do all of this right, everything turns out right. So I thought I knew how to do life. And I did the best I could. And I was doing the right things, and I was wearing the right clothes, and I was getting the right jobs. And you know what? It wasn't turning out right.
What did you do? What was the first step you took?
Well, many times you think you have to go and seek out what's, stopping me. Life kind of, if you are aware, if you have reflective practices, if you write, if you become hyper aware of your day-to-day life, you actually begin to see where you're stopping yourself a whole lot faster. Life will serve stuff up that will cause you to react, and in your reaction, you then learn how you're doing it. I mean, where we are at this moment in time has given all of us, I actually, and this is kind of a fun story. So every year I gather around a young group of friends. I have a very diverse group of friends, and I have one group in particular that are 30 years younger than me. And we come together, usually on New Year's, we write letters of congratulations on what a spectacular year we're going to have. We then seal them. I put them in my safe. In December of the given year, I mail them. And this year I told everyone, we're going to do it in February, because I realized that setting goals in January is not the best thing.
Why?
Well, again, you're falling into the trap of everything has to be done on a certain day. And the truth is, if you allow it to roll out a little bit, you'll have completed the last year and you may see better opportunities. So this year I did that on February 1st. Well, by March 25th, I held a Zoom call, because that's all we could do at that point, where we did a visualization, a 5-year visualization of imagining where you are living, working, the projects. And I took them through a 20-minute, because never in my professional life or in my personal life, no matter how many times we've used the word uncertainty, you never know what's going to happen. You never know what contingency theories, all that crap that we were taught. The truth was, in our economic systems, in our health systems, never had we collectively confronted the level of uncertainty as we're thrown into this year. So I thought, this is a great time to do that exercise, because you really don't know what's going to happen. And you will see what your body and your mind is telling you about possibilities.
You mentioned that love is the only real measure of success. How can we measure love?
Oh, scientifically, Barbara Fredrickson in her lab at Chapel Hill actually does that. And again, I'll go back to positive emotions. And I don't want to, please know, I'm not speaking about sexual attraction. When I speak about love, I'm talking about the positive emotion, human emotion, that comprises many other positive emotions, such as awe and humor and gratitude. There are 9 base positive emotions that have been studied that collectively and separately, you have spontaneous moments. And if you notice them, you actually increase that positive feeling. Well, you put a lot of them together and you think about the people that you feel the best about in your life, and you will see that that is what the feeling of love is about. At the
positive psychology, positive emotion doesn't mean that we will never have negative emotion.
My goodness, no.
Counter balance our negative emotions through positive emotions.
Oh, I will tell you, I think I just came off of one of the, in fact, I know that I came off of one of the toughest weeks. All of the external events that were happening, you must acknowledge negative emotions. What I'm asking you to do is notice if you stay with them too long, because we know that that does not help. And that when negative emotions come up, have the same committee not to tell you don't worry, because that's nonsense. There's times you should darn well be worried. However, if the worry paralyzes you, that's a problem. So what the training, and I'm one who believes that, you do this type of training in the good times so that when the other times show up, it becomes the thing that builds your resilience.
And
it allows you not to stay in the dark longer than you need to.
And I strongly feel that a lot of our worries, negative feelings come from some attachment with those persons, with the things in our life, because we are attached to the things. How do you measure, or I should ask you, how do you define success now in your life? Personal definition of success, according to you.
Yeah, personal definition of success. I feel I am the most successful in any given day when I have been accountable to my own emotions and helped raise the possibility of the people I live and work with.
Love it.
It actually is about being responsible for my feelings on a moment-by-moment basis.
And not being victimized.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a whole different conversation.
And before I ask you my last question for this conversation, I want to ask you, what books in your life have inspired you the most?
Books are a part of my life at such a deep level. Not only do I write them, but they were the thing. And I think when I own during the depth, that little story that I told you about how everything was going, I thought I had done all the right things and I wasn't getting the right result. In the midst of that, I was given a book, and this was the mid-'80s. I was given a book by Scott Peck, The Road Less Traveled. And the opening line, to paraphrase, was something like, life is difficult. And then the next line was, and you can be happy. I used to think that it was either one or the other. I made the mistake of thinking life had to be easy in order for me to be happy. Through positive emotions and love and knowing and seeing natural strengths, I can take on the most difficult situations and know that life is difficult and I can be happy.
Yes, life is difficult and we can be happy. As Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh says, there is no way to happiness. Happiness is the way. We can be happy no matter what is going on in the world, because happiness lies inside of us. It is not something we can acquire in the external reality.
Yes.
And where can our listeners find you online, Andrea?
Online at servingsuccess.com. And there's a ton of really, going back to that free stuff, there's everything from ebooks to the first prototype of the First Don't Die book is there. I've got free 1-minute inspirational audios of quotes. I have whole channels of videos on different strengths and topics. So please do visit servingsuccess.com. If you want to start, it is a place you can get the VIA. You can find out what your strengths are.
There is no lack of information. It is everywhere. It is just we get to do one thing every single day. Small thing is starting with the small, and the power of compound effect will kick in.
Correct.
Thank you so much, Dr. Andrea. It has been an amazing conversation with you.
Thank you. This was an absolute pleasure.
Thank you for listening to this podcast episode today. If you did enjoy this, please subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcast, or you can visit https://nishantgarg.me, NISHANTGARG.me. You can also share this episode with your loved ones to help them live a fulfilled life. You are not alone in this journey. We all struggle in life. There is no shame in talking about it. I go through my highs and lows. I get depressed, and these practices help me in living a resilient life. You can also do this. You got this. Don't judge yourself. You are doing the best you can. And thank you so much again.